Real questions, real answers for real life. Come on in and pull up a chair. You're at 1850 Main Street with Michael DelGiorno and David Zanotti.
TV legend Norman Lear has passed away at the age of 101. Just how big of an impact did he have not only on the television industry, but on America?
You know, I can't help, David, but think about the birthday celebration we did for Mel Brooks and all that we learned about Mel Brooks that so fascinated us that we didn't know. This guy goes into World War II, thinks he's going to be a cook. He ends up defusing bombs. I mean, extraordinary stories to tell. And then his life from the Catskills to comedy, that whole interaction with Sid Caesar just blew my mind. That, you know, he offered Sid Caesar, Sid, we got to make movies. Movies last forever. And Sid's like, well, all right, I'll do it with you. And then the network comes to him and gives him $100,000 a show. So Sid says, look, I got to take $100,000 a show for a couple of years, and then I'll come make movies with you. Mel Brooks is a household name. Sid Caesar was a very funny guy that nobody really remembers because, well, Mel Brooks was right. Shows are weekly, and then they're gone forever. And then Norman Lear passes away at 100. Both very influential, both using comedy to really challenge culture, but two completely different people and two completely different stories, but both worth talking about.
Yeah. Oh, what a story this is. Now, of course, Norman Lear, everyone remembers Norman Lear as in essence, the founding father of the sitcom. And the sitcom being in its modern era in which it's no holds barred sitcom. You can talk about anything, which back in the 70s was highly controversial. And then it takes us right to Archie Bunker and Edith and all of that. But, you know, Michael, you start off with Mel Brooks. I just want to chase that rabbit trail forever. But I don't want to
I shouldn't have done that.
No, but I don't want to forget.
He's our hero, by the way. Groucho Marx is really my hero, but
Mel Brooks is very high on my list. When you come down to one of the things that made Norman Lear so interesting and so powerful in culture is mentioned in a couple of the articles we've been looking at about this passing, is the remembrance that there was a time, and Rob Reiner captured this very significantly. Now, Rob Reiner was Meathead
right
in the Archie Bunker show, just in case anybody doesn't remember that. And I bet there's probably, I'm guessing half the country have never seen now an episode of Archie Bunker. But see, that wasn't the way it was in the 70s. In the 70s, it was the single most watched sitcom. And what we got to remember is what has happened. And I'm emotional about this. I don't know whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. But there was a time in America where every single week there was some show that almost everybody who was watching TV was watching.
Bonanza.
That night.
60 Minutes for a long time. Yeah. But in All of the Family, Happy Days.
There was no on demand. There was no repeats until 6 months later, if it repeated at all. If you were going to see Bonanza or you were going to see Archie Bunker and All in the Family, you were watching on whatever night it was on, at whatever time it was on. And that was your one shot. And tomorrow, what was the first thing you wanted to talk to everybody about at work?
Did you see All in the Family? Seinfeld may be the last one that was like that, don't you think?
Well, yeah. How about Hill Street Blues? I don't know.
Huge.
I mean, people would talk about it. I was in different jobs back then, and I do delivery stuff, and I'd be around a lot of companies, a lot of businesses, and everybody was talking about it, no matter where you were, whether you were in the city, in the suburbs, everybody's talking about, did you see that last night? And the lines that would come out of a Wednesday night episode that were suddenly the words everybody was saying for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, Barney Miller should be in that family too. Norman Lear, though, you realize when people were watching All in the Family, and it later spun off Maude, spun off The Jeffersons, kind of like Mary Tyler Moore, spun off Rhoda and all the other shows. He was probably reaching, I'd have to go back, but probably 5 out of 10 Americans watching it. Now, this is before you get to syndication and the influence in syndication for decades.
Right.
But at the time you're writing that week's show, you are going to reach half of America. And then he was smart enough to push the envelope and tackle issues no one would dare tackle. And I'll get to the brilliance of how he did that later. But he would tackle it so that everybody talked about it.
Yeah.
He was reaching virtually 8 out of 10 Americans every week with his messaging.
The only thing that exists now that works that way is sports. Not even live news anymore works that way. It's sports. And Taylor Swift.
And
the only singular event that's left that has that impact is the Super Bowl.
Super Bowl, yeah.
But even at that now, there's so many instant repeats and everything else on these networks and so on and so forth. But this was a different kind of America. This was like the old world of radio, once a week broadcast, but now it's on television. And it was a shared experience. And Norman Lear capitalized on that. Rob Reiner capitalized on that. His dad, Carl Reiner, capitalized on that. Mel Brooks capitalized on that. They made the most of that medium. And yes, they did film, and those films are still with us today, which will take us to another conversation. That was that moment. And so they were very, very powerful. Now, yes, Norman Lear founded People for the American Way. And yet Norman Lear went and fought for his country and flew in. It was a radio guy on a bomber, bombing the Germans. His life was at risk every single day. He did not hate America. He was trying to protect and defend America the way he saw it functioning best. I happen to disagree. I mean, I'm not the only opinion in the world, but I disagree with everything about the People for the American Way. But I understand why Lear did it. I understand that coming from the community that he came from, in the mindset that he came from, he was afraid of what people on the religious right were going to take away from him. And I think it was also from his industry, that these guys that came out of the world of comedy, particularly Jewish comedy, some of the finest comic minds in the history of the West, were very much afraid of what they didn't understand.
Well, he had to know what Lenny Bruce was going through and others that were being silenced and censored.
They were afraid that Christian people didn't know how to laugh.
Which, by the way, is the brilliance of both him and Mel Brooks, in that we can get further in understanding. In other words, I would stand before anybody and love to make the case, and I'm not a lawyer, I'm just married to one. I would love to make the case that Norman Lear, Mel Brooks, did way more for healing bad history and race relations than Barack Obama ever did.
Wow.
Through humor. And I wanted to say something and make it very clear. I'm like you, and I would word it the way I word things. Everything about Rob Reiner, we have nothing. He is antithetical to everything I believe. Norman Lear probably was as well. But what I'll give both of them credit for, as far left as they are, and I'm probably far right, I will say they both play fair. And Meathead got to be the Meathead and play himself in the far left. But Norman Lear didn't leave him alone. And Norman Lear, and he tackled things. You got to understand, when you said different America, that's everything when you talk about Norman Lear. They flushed a toilet, and it was the top news story for 2 weeks. Oh, my God, we heard a toilet on national television. Remember that?
TV, yeah.
Yeah, because Archie was upstairs, and then he came down. But I mean, Edith got raped.
Mm-hmm.
Maude had an abortion, and this is even prior to the Roe v. Wade ruling. The Jeffersons and all the racial tension between Archie and George Jefferson. He tackled a lot of really big things at a time where America, these were to be unspoken.
And people,
but he always made sure every character was represented.
Yeah, and people he disagreed with.
He didn't bully it.
Yes, he didn't stereotype in return. He did not respond in kind. He was trying to portray the human dilemma through humor. And I have to admire that. This man fought for this country. He believed in liberty. All right. Now, we had a very different viewpoint as to how you work all that out. But he did play fair. He did play fair in his artistic characterization. He played fair. And it shines brighter today because it's almost impossible to find now.
You don't get Friends. You don't get Seinfeld. You don't get Frasier. You don't get Oprah. You don't get Sex in the City. It had to start with him, the groundbreaking.
Yeah.
So, that's what I mean. He's on that Mount Rushmore. I think Carl Reiner's on that. I don't know where you put, you're better with the old radio shows, but, Milton Berle did a lot. Jack Benny, who might be the most talentless icon.
Billy Crystal's got to be there.
Billy Crystal's the greatest ever.
Okay.
Yeah,
now, but let's think about this thing. We talk about Meathead, who got 2 Emmys playing that character as Meathead. But everybody in the cast this is the difference.
Yeah, but we thought it was a role back then, remember?
The left-wing guy got an Emmy at characterization. The right-wing guy got Emmys in characterization. Today, you can't do that. Now it's got to be only one side. This is how America has changed.
And now, a message from your captain.
Remember, the flight attendants are primarily here for your safety. After that, they're here to make the flight more enjoyable. They're going to take care of you guys, but you will listen to what they have to say because they represent my will in the cockpit or in the cabin, and my will is what matters. Be nice to each other. Be respectful of each other. I shouldn't have to say that. People should treat people the way you want to be treated, but I have to say it every single flight because people don't. They're selfish and rude, and we won't have it. Okay? Do your stuff. Get it out everybody else's way. Put your junk where it belongs. Everybody have paid for a space. Don't lean on other people. Don't fall asleep on other people. Don't pass out on other people or drool on them unless you've talked about it. All right, a little bit of fatherhood here. The other thing. The social experiment on listening to videos on speaker mode and talking on a cell phone on speaker mode, that is over and done in this country. Nobody wants to hear your video. I know you think it's super sweet. It probably is. But it's your business, right? So keep it to yourself. Use your AirPods, use your headphones, whatever it is. That's your business, okay? It's just part of being in a respectful society. Middle seaters, I know it stinks to be in the middle. Raise your hands. Raise them up. Anybody in the middle? Like 5 people. Yeah, right. That's full. All right, nobody's listening. Fine. You own both armrests. That is my gift to you.
We hope you enjoy your flight.
Here's one of the greatest ironies of Norman Lear's life. There was a script that was shopped around Hollywood and no one would produce the film. And Rob Reiner wanted it produced because his father, Carl Reiner, read him this book as a child. And so Rob Reiner went to Norman Lear and they made a deal to produce, and Reiner directed The Princess Bride. The Princess Bride is one of the greatest artistic comedic renderings of the virtue of true love between a man and a woman and the sanctity of marriage, with a lot of humor in between. It's one of the most beautiful stories. It is one of the most universally read and watched films to this very day. It's probably the single most influential thing Norman Lear ever did, and the conservative community embraces it completely, and Lear produced it and paid for it, and Rob Reiner asked him to, and Reiner directed it.
And I brought up another Rob Reiner directed film. And, I can't help but watch these things. These stars think they need to tell us how to live and condemn us. And I'm like, why are you putting your audience in this position? So now when I watch something by Rob Reiner, I'm looking for what he's trying to influence, and I watch A Few Good Men. And A Few Good Men is a masterpiece. I mean, Rob's got he's got a couple of, and Sleepless in Seattle, I think was Rob Reiner as well. He's got some masterpieces. And I think he learned from his father, and I think he learned from Norman Lear. And I will say this, in an interview, Rob Reiner is very unfair, plays very unfair, and is very outrageous to the left. But in his movies, he plays fair, like his father and like Norman Lear, through the characters. All the characters are there, and one isn't pitted against another, or, it's a better actor or it gets better lines. They're all exceptional actors with exceptional lines, with exceptional punchlines, with the same amount of character development. So I think, no matter how we talk about this, I think you made me think it, so you get the credit. You have to appreciate Norman Lear. Why are these guys talking about Norman Lear? To appreciate it, you have to know how he changed America and acknowledge it, how different America was and the impact he had on it, and how he played fair in doing it. And then contrast that with how America has changed and now plays very unfair.
Yeah.
That's everything. That's why I think you're so emotional.
Yeah, because these guys today wouldn't have a chance. They wouldn't have a chance.
Oh, no.
They would be viewed as far too objective. They'd be canceled. Every one of them would be canceled because they were willing to try to make the case. Now, I'm not suggesting I agree with one piece of their agenda.
And I don't have to make that observation.
But it's the point that it was a different world, and they were trying to play fair, and they were extremely talented, and they knew how to bring the best talent out of other people. And ironic thing, having lived through the Archie Bunker era, I want to tell you something. There was a lot of people who had to think things through differently on all sides of these conversations because they weren't hidden. And I think that in the end, the truth prevails anyhow. So I'm not ever afraid. I don't want to ever be afraid of a fair conversation because I think in the end, the truth will prevail.
Now, we had cheesy shows like The Brady Bunch, Partridge Family. These were like little 30-minute moral lessons.
My anti-bucket list. I've never seen an episode of The Brady Bunch or The Partridge Family. My goal is to die without ever having seen one.
I think you had a good shot. That was just cheesy. But what Norman Lear did, what Sanford and Son did, what Good Times did, the shows I grew up watching tackled race, tackled poverty, tackled abortion, tackled rape, tackled alcoholism. That took courage. Unless you're forgetting where America was. Look, I got to give her credit, and I stand against everywhere it led to. But Ellen having the courage to do a very funny episode. That's the other thing people forget with history. It was a funny episode. She's in the grocery store and she leans over and the microphone's on and she outs herself as a lesbian, but the first to break a threshold and kiss a woman on a sitcom. You may not like where they were going, but they had the courage to go there and they did it actually funny with fair characters and fair scripts. And I think we were better for it.
Well,
I like that better than I can't watch a television show today. It's just pure indoctrination.
Yeah, I want to get your back on that because I don't want somebody coming by here and hitting you in the back of the head with a bottle because they thought you said something you didn't say. I want to stretch this out just a bit more. What I admire about these folks is they understand the value of humor. They didn't beat people over the head with their agenda. It's an agenda I completely disagree with, but I realize how winsome they were by using humor. And what I would suggest is that maybe it's time that people that are trying to bring traditional principles, I'm talking to myself, to bring back the better parts of America, recognize that you can still have a sense of humor.
Sure.
And have value in the debate. And I'll just point one thing. I have a scripture that inspires me on this in Psalm 37, verse 12. The wicked gnash their teeth against the righteous, the passage says, but the Lord laughs at the wicked because he knows their day is coming. Does that mean God laughs at sin? No. Does that mean God laughs at the consequence of wickedness? Of course not. But when God looks at this from the ultimate eternal perspective, he is not losing sleep. He's not sweating bullets in the heavens because there's bad guys doing bad things on television. Now, we have the responsibility down here to care for our neighbor and love our neighbor. It doesn't absolve us of any responsibility, and we should never take evil lightly. But we've got to understand that God has not lost a sense of humor. And maybe we have to be sure we haven't lost ours.
Yeah, the only thing that would hit me in the back of the head is the Ellen one. But I want to take a stand for Norman Lear and say, even though now I know, a great analogy is always Walter Cronkite. As it turns out, Walter Cronkite was as left as they came.
Yeah, but you never would have known that watching him on television.
You wouldn't have known it in an assassination. You wouldn't have known it in a moon landing. And you wouldn't have known it in a conversation about recession or debt or Watergate. All right. So, as it turns out, we kind of all knew Norman Lear was pretty left politically. But I will stand by this. In every one of those shows, whatever his agenda was, I would have no way of knowing because every character had a voice and every character took their stand and took it well. He didn't use it to sell his agenda. And I think that's worth acknowledging because if nothing else, it was a far more effective way.
Well, and some may disagree and say, no, he was selling it. He was just smart enough to sell it incrementally. He was selling it by getting it on the table. He was selling it by not having it thrown off the table. That may all be true too. But the fact of the matter is he at least attempted to inspire a fair fight, and he was hilarious.
I was going to say, All in the Family. Was it political? Was it controversial?
It was all of that.
But was it hilarious?
It was hilarious.
Of course. And Maude, wasn't that funny? Jefferson's, come on, it was funny,
And wouldn't it be healthy if every single part of our tribal, separated, divided house here in 1850 could just recognize you can laugh at yourself? Because none
I do
of
every
us
morning.
is perfect.
Every morning I try to slip into a large versus extra large. So how different America was, the impact he had is a big deal, and how he played fair in doing it compared to where we're at now, where how much America's changed. They don't play fair. And really probably the greatest expense, can a Norman Lear exist today?
And here's another way of saying the same question. We got to get out of here, I know, but here's another way to answer that very same question. How long is it going to be before they finally cancel Blazing Saddles? Because it's still out there. And it couldn't possibly be any more politically incorrect. How long before ultimately they take on Mel Brooks?
The conversations are just getting started. To get connected, check out 1850mainstreet.com. We don't data mine anyone or sell your information. Subscribe today so you don't miss a single conversation. We'll see you next time here at 1850 Main Street.